Hello again. Welcome back to another edition of Electric Avenue's Summer Updates 2022. This is August 12th, right? This is what is coming on tap this week. So, there wasn't a whole lot this week. I feel like this is the week where we really hit the summer doldrums, and there's a lot coming in the next few weeks. But I just wanted to kind of give you guys a little heads up as to what's out there. And I thought now might be a good time, now that MoFi Gate is starting to settle down a little bit. Updates on what I've been listening to a lot this year, what some of my favorite records are. You can take that as what you want, or you can just say, like, that guy doesn't know what he's listening to. Um, I suppose that you have to take into account certain things, and I'll get to that. Anyway, new releases this week. Not a whole lot to report, but I do want to get these up here for you. Black Thought, along with Danger Mouse. This is their new record together, Cheat Codes. So if you're hankering for some Roots action, here's your chance. Black Thought being the lead rapper of the Roots, probably the most prominent member alongside Questlove. This album features guest appearances from Raekwon, Joey Badass, Michael Kiwanuka, ASAP Rocky, Run the Jewels, and more. So if you're looking for some good hip hop, I think you should start there. Another interesting release, Terrace Martin's Drones. He's done some work with Kamasi Washington and sort of the jazz realm, but this album features guest appearances from Kendrick Lamar, Snoop Dogg, Ty Dolla Sign, Robert Glasper, Kamasi, Leon Bridges, and more. Sort of a hip hop jazz kind of record. Another record that might be of interest, Brockhampton. So I guess Brockhampton says that they're going on some kind of hiatus. And they never really sort of got massive, although I think they were big in streaming land. But anyway, this album is called Roadrunner. Let's see. The OCs return with A Foul Form, and they say that this is more in line with their punk roots. So there's that. They seem to be a band kind of like Ty Segall, who's just always, or King Gizzard, who's always releasing stuff. The Yardbirds, this is a reissue, Best of the Yardbirds. Let's see. I think this was released by Demon UK. Yeah, it features For Your Love, Shapes of Things, Heart Full of Soul, kind of some of their biggest or best hits. Pavement, Slanted and Enchanted. This has been out many times in other forms, and this is basically the 30th anniversary on red, white, and black splatter vinyl. So it's really just a special pressing of it. A record that had been out of print or was music on vinyl had put it out. Moby's Everything Is Wrong. I used to love this album so much. I mean, I still think it's great. It's kind of where rave culture and ambient music met, and this is really before he went huge with the Play album and all of the blues samples. So it's a little more ravey, but it's good, and it's also got some really cool ambient stuff. Things like God Moving Over the Face of the Waters that got used in movie soundtracks. I think it was used in Heat, maybe. The De Niro Pacino movie. Let's see. Bad Brains, Rock for Light. This is the they call it the Punk Note edition. Basically, they've designed the cover to look like a Blue Note record. Pretty ingenious, right? Don't you wish every band did something like that? It's kind of cool. Let's see. And the last sort of new release, prominent vinyl, is Art Blakey In My Prime. This actually, I think a few of these might have leaked out earlier, but this is Light in the Attic put this together. This was supposed to be a record store day piece back in April. Then it got pushed to the June date, and then those didn't show up, so it's finally out there in limited quantities, of course. So not like you haven't waited long enough. There's a few CDs I want to mention, and I think this first one's available on vinyl too. I just don't have it right here. But Collective Soul's new album. This is called Vibrating. The new Goo Goo Dolls album, Chaos in Bloom. You say, is it the 90s? Erasure's Dayglow. Maybe it's the 80s. And this actually was made up of parts of their last record where Vince Clarke sort of, I guess, tweaked a lot of things and Andy sang new parts. So those are, I think that the Collective Soul and the Erasure are on vinyl. Not sure about the Goo Goo Dolls yet. Klaus Schulze, I guess this would be one of his last records that he was working on. Deus Arrakis. Is that a Dune reference, obviously? And Fatal Mistakes. This is B-Sides of Delamitri. B-Sides and Rarities. Okay. So, like I said, light week. I thought, I'd kind of like to go through some of my favorite albums to this point of this year and give you guys sort of like, I don't know, some insight into what I'm listening to. Just my background, really. I've been in the music business for, well, you call this the music business, for like over 30 years. I have very sort of, I don't know, I guess what you would call kind of mainstreamish tastes, although I do like a lot of underground music too, but I'm not talking like way off the beaten path. And, I'm kind of like not into, if there's any genre that's like takes over, I'm not really always into that. I don't know what I'm trying to say, except you got to take these things with a grain of salt, my age and, sort of what these artists say to me. I've had people who've expressed before like interest of like, oh, what are you listening to, or what are you into? And I think at some point I'd like to do a little more in-depth on albums from the past that really still resonate with me. And but that's not what this is today. These are albums of the present. And these are all new records, so I'm not doing reissues here. This is going to be like all new records from bands that are still working today, whether they're brand new bands or bands that have been around for 40 years, okay? So the first couple are just kind of honorable mentions that I want to get in here. One is Tears for Fears, The Tipping Point. This was their first record in, almost 20 years, I think, 17. And stylistically, it's not like they were breaking new ground or anything, but I think it was a great meditation on what Roland Orzabal had gone through with his wife and their addiction problems and her subsequent death. It's an interesting meditation on when you get older, how those things sort of resonate in your life. And anyone who's had a death experience or a near-death experience, I think that album is a good listen because it's very relatable and calming in a way. And it's got some beautiful tunes on it, too, and beautiful singing. I don't think it's on the level of, say, Songs from the Big Chair. I don't think that anyone would expect that at this point. But it is, it's very good, and I don't know, I enjoyed it better than the last comeback record that they had a while back. The other one I wanted to mention right here is Soft Cell. This is their new record, Happiness Not Included. Ironically, they had already chosen this artwork of Chernobyl, the fairground there, sort of desolate and whatever, before any of the Ukrainian attacks started happening. But it's still, after 40 years, Mark Almond on vocals and Dave Ball on keyboards. And they had lots of issues getting this out. First, they couldn't get the vinyl made for several months, so that got pushed back. Then I think Mark had COVID, and then Dave injured his back and was not able to get out of the hospital to promote it. Apparently, they are touring this fall in the U.S. A little bit. But health and age, they kind of affect things, but it's a very good sort of synth pop album that harkens back to their 80s stuff. I would say it's less on the seedy, sexy kind of side and more on the oh my God, where are we politically and what sort of scary world events are going on. So, hence the dystopian sort of imagery. In the CD realm, I wanted to point out a couple of things. Beyonce, I know people will say like, "Oh, really?" Actually, this is a really great record. It's not for everybody. If you have issues with like uh, four-letter words, you might not want to listen to it. But I think it's a very interesting concept record. I like hearing her sort of reach out and expand a little bit and try and bring in a little more of the dance music realm. I mean, I like the fact that she references a lot of history on this album of music, and it's not all like, hey, this just dropped in from like the sky and it has no reference point. So I do appreciate that. I think that the tunes are interesting because the album segues and flows in a really interesting way. And it's not something I'll play a lot in the store just because of the language issues, but maybe that, I mean, it really doesn't bother me outside of work, but, those are things that you might want to take into account if you have kids. And the other one on CD I want to mention is this Ex Propaganda. And this album is called The Heart is Strange. And again, this is a project by Claudia Brooken and Susanna Freitag, along with producer Steven Lipson. And Propaganda was a band in the 80s that they were assigned to ZTT, which was Trevor Horn's label. He sort of executive produced their first album, and there were so many interband arguments and turmoil that they never really got a follow-up album out. They kind of did, but with a different singer, and it wasn't good. And Claudia went off and did another project, and it was a decent project, but called Act, and that didn't last very long either. Then she went solo, and it's sort of been up and down for them for a long time. So after 30 as like 30 years, almost 27 years, we finally get a follow-up that actually sounds sort of like the follow-up to the original. Again, it's not particularly like gonna set the world on fire with its originality. It's more about modern synth pop. It's a little bit more minimal and cleaner, sort of like the Soft Cell than the original. But Claudia still has a great voice, and Susanna does a lot of spoken word in German, which I suppose if you're not German, it can come off as a little bit like, ooh, that's spooky maybe, but it just has an interesting speaking voice, and I think that they make a good team. All right, so I picked out 10 records in the store that I thought, I'll feature these and sort of work my way up towards like my favorite at the end. One of them, the first one I'm going to show is The Weeknd, and this is Dawn FM. This came out at the beginning of this year, and while it doesn't have the knockout singles that the last album, After Dark, with Blinding Lights did, this not only has great singles like Take My Breath, but it has a concept that kind of pulls the record together in a good full listen sort of way, playing as like a radio station in purgatory. And this old version of The Weeknd on the cover. And I do like the fact that Jim Carrey is sort of the DJ from hell on it. It's a very interesting record and catchy. And if you like Michael Jackson vibes or whatever, boy, you get that in spades on that album. That's a very like Michael Jackson Reborn kind of thing. If he took the Thriller idea and made it less horror and more about being trapped in some sort of mental kind of situation. That's what that is. Spiritualized everything was beautiful. I've liked Spiritualized for a long time. I think they have several great albums, especially Ladies and Gentlemen, We're Floating in Space. But I like this album a lot. This is probably my favorite of theirs in a while. And while I've liked the last couple, I feel like this one benefits from being a little more brief. There's 7 tracks. It still runs about 45, 50 minutes, but so they're long. But I feel like the songs, it gives them time to kind of breathe and kind of layer on the elements as it goes through a song. And sometimes they get a little chaotic sounding, and that's you start asking yourself almost like, what's going on in the mix? And that's kind of a cool thing. I think it's and it's very sort of minimal Brit rock when you get down to like the actual writing of it. But I don't know. I think Jason Pierce is really cool, and that he did a good job. Another sort of really interesting modern rock. I mean, these bands, he's been around for 30 years, 25 at least in Spiritualized. And here's another one. I mean, we're calling these legacy heritage indie rock bands now. Spoon, Lucifer on the Sofa. It's another great album from Spoon and a string of them. I really loved the last 3 or 4, well, 3, I guess. Was it Transference? That was sort of but this is great. Catchy. Like, it's full of riffs. Brett does some really great singing on this. It's a little ragged, but still, he still has tone in his voice. Songs like Wild, The Hardest Cut, On the Radio. Great, catchy album. Does not overstay its welcome. I'm finding that a lot of my favorite albums this year are not necessarily super long, with the exception of maybe 1 or 2. So, we don't have a lot of time in this world, so let's make the most of it. Destroyer, Labyrinthitis. This is a fantastic album, and I don't know, I think they just keep getting better and changing. I don't know how many more bands can, like, completely overhaul their sound or use different elements of their sound every time and make it sound interesting. It always kind of sounds a little bit like you're being lectured by a rumpled college professor. But this album, I think he sort of, they sort of go down more the route of sort of like New Order-y a little bit, I suppose, at times, with a little more electronics, kind of following on from the last record, but I think it's a little warmer, more expanded. Reminds me a little more of their album Kaput, which was one of my favorites 10 years ago. So anyway, check that out. Out of nowhere came Wet Leg, another really great indie rock album this year. 2 girls from Wales, and every song is like humorous in some way, catchy, very 90s sounding. So there's a little bit of nostalgia in the sound, but it's all sort of sung with this kind of cleverish, like girl next door kind of vibe, and it just makes you laugh and feel good. Some of the lyrics are hysterical. I suppose that some people who are a little more serious musicians, it might be a little lightweight, but I don't know. It's great, kind of like carefree sort of summer music if you want to kind of escape a little bit from some of the heaviness all the time. All right, another one, Big Thief. I Believe in You. So, to Big Thief's credit, this is not normally my style of music listening at all. I don't really go for the folky hillbilly kind of sound or whatever, and there's a fair amount of that on here. But there's also a lot of kind of indie rock type stuff that approaches a more like ragged guitar-y Portishead or something like that. Adrienne Lenker has an incredible way with her voice. It's not like, again, like she's no like Beyonce, but she has a very unique and interesting voice, and she and the band have very interesting writing, and kind of the way that they approach songs. It's very loose. Every song has its own sort of like attitude and frame of reference, and they recorded this, I think, at 3 or 4 different studios, and that sort of comes across the kind of vibe and how it changes and all. A double record, it's long, but it doesn't feel long. So I don't know, if you're into sort of Americana, I would check that out. They're definitely unique. All right, so I guess what we're in the top 4 now. Elvis Costello, The Boy Named If. The Boy Named If, Imaginary Friend. This is probably my favorite Elvis album of the last 30 years. And that's saying something because he's released a lot of good records. I don't know if there's been anything necessarily on the level of his 70s into 80s stuff, but this came closer to me than anything. It the Imposters play on it, and it's very sort of, it sounds like an unreleased Elvis Costello album from like 1982. It's great. It's sort of like the musicianship is just incredible. The writing is incredible. And I mean, he just released an album like a couple years ago, if even, and it was a great album. But this, I think, is even more so because it feels like the band is so energized on it. The drumming and the bass playing, Elvis's guitar, the keyboard. I mean, it's really. When you get to be such a heritage artist, where do you put something like this? It's hard to say because he's got, I don't know, 35, 40 albums, something like that. But, and maybe I like it a little more than some critics are saying because of a certain nostalgia factor, I suppose. But I just love how plugged in he is on that record, and some great songs, and a lot of character sketches. Kind of even does a Tom Waits on 1 or 2 songs. So, and he's old enough now that he can do that. So I guess the final 3 here. Daniel Rawson, you belong there. Daniel's was a member of Grizzly Bear. I'm not sure that there's a functioning entity at the moment. It doesn't seem like it. I really didn't. I mean, I listened to Grizzly Bear off and on, and I don't know why it never really grabbed me so much. And maybe it's because he needed to step out of the shadows. This album is quirky. It's odd. It's not commercial at all. It is extremely artistic. It's a mix of like jazz and folk, and which is I suppose an odd mix in 2022. But listening to him play and construct his songs, I'm left speechless at how ingenious this stuff is. And he also took the time during lockdowns to really refine learning how to play like a bunch of woodwinds, a bunch of strings. I mean, he literally does everything on that record except for the drumming. So, if you're interested in kind of like the more arty side of Radiohead, you might want to like check that out. I would say at least give it a listen on Spotify or whatever you listen with. I don't have that, but that's not my thing. But I just bought the record because I heard about it, and I saw a performance online and it appealed to me. Number 2 so far at this point, The Smile. This is a light for attracting attention, and as many of you know already, this is basically Radiohead without all of the members. It's Tom York, Johnny Greenwood, and their drummer, who is from the jazz group, escapes me, Sons of Kemet, Tom Skinner. It's right there on the sticker. If you like old school Radiohead, this is for you. I don't know how else to say it. When I say old school, I mean Hail to the Thief, Kid A, little bit of In Rainbows. It's political at times, but it doesn't knock you over the head. It's Tom York, I think, at one of his best. And it's interesting to me because it's selling, it's not blowing out, and I think because there's a name recognition problem, and also because the vinyl is kind of expensive. I kind of blame XL or whoever's shipping these, probably I'm sure they're coming from overseas. So everything's costing more now. I've talked about that, but anyway. And then my favorite record so far this year still is Sandra Larkey, and this album is called Avatars of Love. And I know many of you are saying, who? And it's funny because you look this up on Metacritic and it doesn't even exist. It's like that nobody bothers to review it because it's not on a major label, or I think it's on his label now, although it does say In Grooves on the back, which I think is some sort of Universal subsidiary. But anyway, and you can't find the CD in stores because he's only selling it through his website or at his shows. But this is a fantastic album. But I think you kind of, again, you have to be sort of into like, I want to say sort of like 60s, 70s folk singer-songwriter, a little bit Brazilian samba, jazz. It's so eclectic, but really it's the songwriting that gets me. I think he sort of expanded his songwriting a lot with this record. It actually started on his last three or four records. He's been very prolific lately, but he went through some breakups, and I think that infuses the songs with their perspectives, and also he writes in a more storytelling sort of fashion on a lot of the songs. Some of them are still like 3-4 minute pop songs that are real catchy, but anyway, check that out. Okay, so I'm kind of running out of time. I just want to mention next couple of weeks we have new releases from Panic at the Disco, Hot Chip, Mountain Goats next week, some Blue Notes. The week after, the 26th, Silk Sonic and Kendrick Lamar finally on vinyl. Muse, reissues from Crosby, Stills, Nash and the Doors. September 2nd, Megadeth, King's X, Trail of the Dead. September 9th, Ozzy Osbourne, Built to Spill, Afghan Wigs, and a very interesting Oliver Sim of the XX. And September 16th is the next big day. Mars Volta, Pink Floyd, Animals reissue, Wilco, Yankee Hotel box, some Coltrane, Blue Train reissues, George Michael, older, Beyonce on vinyl, Death Cab for Cuties, new record, reissues from Miles Davis and Joni Mitchell. So that's just in the next, 4 weeks, I suppose. Anyway, I'm running out of time, like I said, and I really am trying to keep these at like a half an hour. So thank you very much, guys, for watching. I don't really have more to say about Mobile Fidelity Gate, except I give Michael Esposito credit from In Groove down in Phoenix for breaking the story open. And if you haven't read the Washington Post article, go read that. It's very informative, and I think you learn a lot about all of the angles in that, even if it seems somewhat biased. I can't really tell, actually. And at this point, I think a lot of other people have done a better job sort of voicing that. There's a guy with a YouTube channel, Poetry on Plastic, I believe, who's gotten very in-depth about how the breakdowns of those are. So maybe watch his couple recent videos. He's young and hip and knows what he's talking about. So, all right. Thank you very much, and thanks to all of you for watching me again. And have a great week. All right. The weather's going to be getting a little cooler around here, so fall's on the way. Take care of yourselves. Peace.